Hello and good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today. We're about to go live, or actually we are live, but we will wait a few more seconds until we receive more of the audience, and thank you all for joining us. I see the number of participants increasing, so that's always a good reassuring sign. We will start in a minute or so. Thank you all for being with us today. And warm greetings from Geneva and Paris, as Jérôme is joining us from there. Okay, so let us be Swiss and let us start this webinar. And hello again, and good afternoon, and welcome to this new webinar and this new expert briefing offered by the Security Assessment in North Africa project, SANA project of the Small Arms Survey. And we are based in Geneva, Switzerland. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jérôme, and the audience for being with us today in this webinar. My name is Ala Tartir, and I'm a researcher at the Small Arms Survey and the project lead of the SANA project. And it is my pleasure to welcome our SANA expert and long-term consultant with us, Jérôme Tubiana. Thank you, Jérôme, for being with us today and to brief us on Chad and what is happening on Chad, what are the local dynamics, the regional changes, and the international responses as far as Chad is concerned in the aftermath of the killing of the former president, Idriss Déby. And we really think this is a very timely and topical issue to discuss today. And Jérôme is joining us, building on his 2 decades long of experience and research. So briefly, let me introduce Jérôme, who's a researcher specializing in conflicts and migration. And over the past 20 years, he has worked in conflict areas of Sudan, Chad, Niger, Libya, South Sudan, and Central African Republic. And he conducted research for us, for the Small Arms Survey and other organizations. And he's the author of several books as well, and his articles were featured in multiple prestigious outlets like Foreign Policy, Foreign Affairs, and London Review of Books, as well as the Le Monde Diplomatique. And this is his latest publication for the Small Arms Survey on diaspora in despair. It is available on our website that you can access it freely. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome the audience who are with us today. Thank you so much for being with us and joining us. If you were not able to make it, don't worry. We're recording this webinar and it will be available on our YouTube channel and our website shortly after this webinar. And if you're not following us on social media and you're not on our on our mailing list, please do so now. We promise you lots of valuable knowledge in your inbox. And finally, I would like to mention that this is the second webinar in a 5 parts webinar series that we're organizing to cover different topics. Covering Chad, Morocco, Libya, Burkina Faso, and last week we discussed issues related to weapons and explosive in North and West Africa. And finally, I would like to thank the governments of the Netherlands and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Netherlands for its continued investment and support to the SANA project, the security assessment in North Africa. Sorry for the long introduction, Jérôme. We're aiming, and the audience, we're aiming for a brief briefing. And on that note, I would like to move to you, Jérôme, and ask you a couple of questions on the issues that we're discussing today on Chad. And maybe if we start by trying to set the stage for this topic and for the audience that are with us today, can you brief us on what is currently going on in Chad? Over the past months, Chad been really everywhere in the media. So if you can brief us what is currently going on and what are the main highlights and issues that are ongoing and are unfolding that we need to keep an eye on at the local level.
Right. Thanks, Ala, for the very nice introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So maybe first, what actually happened in a few words. Well, as you all know, for 30 years, Chad has been under the same ruler, Idriss Déby, and he clung to power thanks to, for the facade, regular rigged elections and changes of the constitution. In recent years, his power circle became more and more narrow, so that dissidents appeared within his own community, within his army, and within his own family. So in April, Déby, in spite of all these problems, decided to run for election for the 6th time without any surprise on the outcome. Then the rebels came. For years, the Chadian rebels have always existed, and for years, Chadian rebels have been based in Libya, surviving there as well as we already mentioned in various SANA reports, as guns for hire for different Libyan factions. One of the groups is called the FACT, in French, Front pour l'Alternance et la Concorde au Tchad, decided to attack on election day, and they rushed toward the capital, as usually Chadian rebels do. They were intercepted by the Chadian army 300 kilometers from the capital. As usually as well, Déby himself went to the front line, likely to make sure his troops would not demobilize. Then it was announced he had been killed, officially by the rebels. But another version is that he was killed during a shooting between his guards and between a frustrated general and that general's guards from his own tribe. So people from the same tribe having an altercation and killing each other. In fact, this scenario of Déby's violent death has been in the mind and had been predicted for long. But it seems Déby had, because he wanted to stay in power, he had prevented people, including his own family, to discuss succession or transition plans. As a result, it seemed everyone in Chad abroad was caught by surprise, and in haste, a group of generals, most of them from Déby's Zawa tribe, proclaimed themselves as a transitional military council under Déby's son, called Mohamed Kaka. He's a young general in his 30s. In effect, it was a military coup and a breach of the constitution. France, this is Chad's main backer, obviously, first supported fully the TMC, the military council, and then after some criticism, there were calls everywhere for democratic transition and inclusive dialogue. So that's where we are. Since then, everyone is looking at the situation, wondering if such transition and dialogue will really take place, if they will be genuine, and if France will really support them.
Thank you very much, Jérôme, for this introduction. I know there are so many issues to unpack there, and maybe one of them is related to the to the fighters of the front for change and conquer in Chad. So maybe if you can also take a few minutes, please, to tell us about them, and also if they are becoming more dominant now in light of what is happening now and during this transition phase. Are they becoming more dominant? How do you see their future trajectories as a group?
Well, actually, they made a buzz, but in fact, without playing on words, that front, the fact, was largely defeated, and some of them described had attempted as a kind of suicide attack. There were no insurance that they could really defeat the army. They were hoping actually that the Chadian army would demobilize, but it did not really demobilize, even if it had losses. And they were hoping the France would remain neutral. As a matter of fact, France did not bomb the fact as a fact recognized, but still France provided a very crucial intelligence, so played a role, was not neutral. So of course, the fact may still be able to reconstitute in Libya. As you know, Libya is a place where it's not difficult for a Chadian rebel movement or a Sudanese rebel movement, for that matter, to find troops and equipment. But it may not be that easy for the fact, precisely because what they have done is made them maybe a bit too much under the radar. And of course, there are other groups in Libya, other Chadian rebel groups, but precisely, I think the main reason of the fact's failure, and maybe that reason has not been clearly highlighted, is that there may have been a lack of coordination between the fact and those other groups. Division, of course, has always been a problem in the Chadian rebellion and has only aggravated in the last decade. FACT itself was born as a splinter group, and then it generated another splinter, so that you had three groups with fighters belonging to the same ethnic group, the Goran, but different clans. So a lot of divisions. And FACT didn't do that well in terms of coordination. Basically, they told those who wanted to join from other groups that they can join, or they can follow, or they can organize simultaneous attacks, but they did not really attempt a full process to organize a real political military coalition or alliance, which should be somehow the only way to really make sure that when you reach Chad, you show some unity that can convince people to support you within Chad. And there was a lack of trust that also didn't help between those groups, and a lack of trust regarding the fact. First, because remember, those groups had fought each other when they splintered. And second, because oddly, in Libya, the fact had found itself on the side of General Haftar, while the other Chadian rebels were more naturally on the anti-Haftar side in Libya. I said more naturally because Haftar is a strong ally of France and of Chad. So for a Chadian rebel group, it may not have been that easy. It was not that easy to survive and even to strive under Haftar's nominal control. So basically, the fact was fighting on the same side than the Chadian government and then France. As a result, for the other rebels, there is a possibility that the fact actually fought other Chadian rebels when the different Libyan factions were fighting, and there are also suspicions that the fact, if they were to enter Chad, could enter Chad to surrender rather than fight. It's not what happened, but there were suspicions before the fact entered Chad. So now, what is also quite noticeable is that the fact leader always kept a hand open to negotiations, even in the midst of fighting. And actually, the current situation could offer a good opportunity, a good window for such a dialogue to take place.
And if we stick to these regional dynamics, Jérôme, and based on what you just talked about, what are the regional implications following the death of President Déby here? What kind of implications that we can see at the regional level? Who would regress and who would progress regionally speaking here? But maybe before you answer this question, this is a quick reminder to the audience who are with us today to please feel free to ask your questions in the chat bar, and I will read it to Jérôme. Any question that you have in terms of clarifications or any other questions, please don't hesitate to add it to the chat bar, and I will bring it to Jérôme. But Jérôme, on the regional implications.
Maybe let me start with Libya and then I'll move to Sudan. Those are maybe the two most important regional players regarding Chad. Within Libya, it's certainly better news for the government in Tripoli than for Haftar. Not only because Déby was clearly an opponent to the government in Tripoli, but also because both Chad and France may now actually change their views on Haftar. I don't know how much Chad and France are actually angry against Haftar for allowing or for not preventing the fact raid, but it's likely they will see him, Haftar, as rather careless or unreliable regarding what foreign forces under his, of course, nominal theoretical control are doing, especially at his southern borders. And then there is Sudan. Actually, what's happening in Chad will not necessarily affect or impact the good Chad-Sudan relations. They've been good for a decade now, against all odds. They even survived opposed positions in Libya, and they also survived Bashir's removal, President Omar al-Bashir's removal in Sudan. So it seems to me that the transitional authorities, because now you have a transition in both Chad and Sudan, the transitional authorities in both countries have indicated already very quickly that they want to continue their good relations. In Chad, some of the appointees, of the new appointees within the TMC, the Transitional Military Council, and within the government, already played an important role in Chad-Sudan relations under Déby, under Bashir, and they are likely to continue playing that role. From a Sudanese perspective, this is also because Sudan is really now trying hard to establish good relations in Europe, including with France. And even yesterday, there was an important economic and investment conference in Paris, organized by the French government for Sudan, actually trying hard to find to help Sudan survive the economic crisis it is facing. And as a result, Sudan will need to have good relations with whoever France will support in Chad. In the meantime, Chad will likely be a bit weaker in the regional level without Déby, and a weaker Chad is not necessarily bad news from Sudan. Here, I'm not necessarily talking about the destabilizing role Chad used to have in the past, because more recently, Chad actually had quite a more positive stabilizing role in Sudan and in Darfur in particular, at the border between Chad and Sudan. But there are worries now, including in France, that the Chadian army will now be busy with internal concerns, with internal concerns and less available for operations against terrorism abroad. Remember that Chad has made a signature in its policy of lending troops for fighting terrorism in the Sahel, and Sudan is interested in playing that role too. Sudan has too many troops, even much more than Chad, including regular forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces led by Mohammed Hamdan Daglo Hemmeti, known by his nickname Hemmeti, who recently became actually a close ally to Idriss Déby in Chad, and also, of course, in Sudan is the number 2 of the Sovereign Council leading the Sudanese transition. And so Hemmeti already has, Sudan, not only Hemmeti, but Sudan has already sent troops abroad, including regular forces and Hemmeti's RSF in particular, in Yemen in exchange for financial and political support. Now Yemen is less attractive, but Sudan has already indicated for long willingness to lend troops for military operations in the Sahel. So Hemmeti himself in particular indicated that the partnership Déby had made with the West, that is lending his army for the fight against terrorism in the Sahel, was a model to follow for him. And that's important. I think that's an important indication of how regional relations will actually, let's say, better which agendas are likely to remain very important in regional relations. And of course, Sudan is now interested to be to be part of another type of bloc it used to be part of during Bashir time.
Thanks for all of these insights, Jérôme. And as we're talking about Sudan, it is also worth highlighting our work through the HSPA project of the Small Arms Survey, the Human Security Baseline Assessment for Sudan and South Sudan, where we produced work, including by Jérôme, as this report and others in collaboration between HSPA and Survey and the SANA project. And some of these dynamics that Jérôme talked about are available in these reports. But Jérôme, before you mentioned France, of course, a couple of times, and that is obviously for very obvious reasons. But it's not the only international actor that is concerned. So there are many involved and concerned international actors in Chad. How will these recent events, although they are still unfolding, but like the changes that are happening over the past months, how would they change the calculations, priorities, agenda, as you just said, policies, interventions of these concerned international actors? I know this is rather generic questions, but any glimpse and highlights that you have for us at the international scene level?
You're right to say that many are involved, but unlike in other countries like Libya or Sudan, where many are really involved in a kind of relatively equal level, the peculiarity of Chad is that France is so dominant and hegemonic in its role. Almost not acting as a foreign player, but as an internal player, that taking decisions that are actually concerning Chad's internal situation and not only its foreign situation, that it actually almost prevented others to really be involved, in spite of the fact that France for decades now have been calling to a kind of let's say multilateralization of its intervention in Chad. It didn't take place because France was not totally sincere. Of course, they wanted and they got support increasingly from the EU in particular, and they wanted support from others as well. They still want it, but they are not willing to really open the decision process. And that's been a problem. Now, actually, and precisely about that, France is at the crossroads. Whether it continues its policy and supports a new military regime in exchange for Chad keeping landing forces in the Sahel, or it seizes the current opportunity to support democratic change in Chad. On the other side, of course, other players are actually seeing that French hegemonic role, which is really increasingly making France unpopular in Chad, as an opportunity to actually intervene in Chad as well, but not that much for Chad's own beauties, but actually to undermine France in general. That's especially, of course, people suspect that could be especially the meaning of Russian policies in the region. There is indeed competition between France or more generally the West and Russia in Central Africa, and even elsewhere, of course. You could see the dynamics at the Security Council level in the UN are often quite opposed. And well, unfortunately, that competition, including in Central Africa, is not very useful. Russia is now very influential in the Central African Republic, just south of Chad. And there are worries that it is also willing to set foot in Chad, and that it even may have supported FACT, the rebel group, in that idea. And this is not confirmed. I think we should be cautious on that. It's possible that Russia has not been involved at all, especially given that in Libya, Russia and France have been exceptionally on the same side. But what's important is to see that indeed there are international dynamics which may be really frustrating for the Chadian people, because it's actually preventing them to decide of their own fate.
Mm-hmm. And linking here, I mean, this is one, I have one final question, but linking exactly to what you just said, like when we put the Chadian people in the core of the analysis and vis-a-vis the external intervention and the different interests that these political powers and military powers have. So how do we, as an international community, ensure that we're not doing harm at these times of transition? Like, what should we do and what we should not do in order to stick to these principles of doing no harm through the intervention during this transition time? This is my last question, and then I already see one first questions from the audience.
Yeah, well, definitely, Chad is one of the several places. many others are making the headlines now, where it's actually difficult to say we or to speak about an international community. I would wish that would be a first thing to do no harm. There should first be a we. But even main international players are not that coherent between different countries where they intervene, and mostly I think that there needs to be a lot more coherence, especially on the part of France, between different international interventions in the region, and those interventions, those international interventions, they should abide with the same principles, according to the same standards. Chad should not be an exception, and the word is important because immediately when the Transitional Military Council in Chad was set up, the French Foreign Affairs Minister justified supporting it using the word exceptional situation. Actually, that's not an exceptional situation. These things happen. They happen in Sudan. They will happen again in other places. But Chad is not a colony anymore. And as a result, France should actually, it's now good time to transform its military view and its military support to an army in Chad into another type of intervention, rather a political support, of course, to ideally a democratic transition. And in fact, France's and the European Union's policy in Chad since Déby's death should not be different to what they have been in Sudan since Bashir's death. I don't mean the situation is absolutely similar, it's not, of course, but in Sudan, France and the EU, in spite of actually years of rather blind support to the Bashir regime, they actually very quickly reacted and have supported quite genuinely a democratic civilian transition and a dialogue inclusive of the armed opposition. So that is what actually most of the Chadian players, from the civil society to the armed opposition, are actually demanding, and support to those widely shared demands will be crucial.
Thank you, Jérôme, for that. I will stop myself from asking more questions and go to the audience. I see a first question from Katie Clement, and Katie is taking us back to the question on the regional dynamics. And you highlighted Libya and Sudan and the implications of all of this vis-a-vis these two countries. But Katie's question is, what will be the likely impact in the Sahel, G5 and Lake Chad?
Well, there were worries that the Chadian army would actually demobilize because it needs to be in Chad, whether to support the new authorities against possible new attacks, although it doesn't seem that likely in the short term, or to support a military junta against attempts to install a civilian rule, or to participate into new struggles for power that have actually been emerging between those generals in the military council and others who don't necessarily feel represented or who don't favor that type of transition, or even within possibly the military council itself. That also, that concerns have also kind of vanished in recent days. They don't seem that likely. Of course, the military council has also smartly capitalized on the French fears that the Chadian army would demobilize to kind of use those as use its military role abroad again, like Déby used to do. Remember, Déby regularly used to threaten to withdraw its forces, sometimes for good reasons. Honestly, the Chadian army was overstretched, overused. But then the military council knows that they can use the threat to get more support from France in particular. The real question actually, maybe, and after that, quite quickly as well, actually, the military council and in particular his chairman, Déby's son, Mohamed Kaka, actually indicated that Chad would remain committed to those military interventions. By the way, some key Chadian opponents, including the FAC leader, also indicated that they would not change much. Would they take power or take part into a new transitional arrangements? So I don't think the threat is that big, but what I think the current situation actually should invite France and other partners to rethink the model of the intervention, because relying so much on that Chadian army doesn't seem that viable in the long term. And well, for a long time, people have indicated that the whole intervention, especially in Mali, should actually be rethought. It's not happening that well. There's been collateral damage recently and increasing, growing unpopularity. Chadian forces as well can be abusive and are not that popular in places where they intervened, whether abroad or in Chad. But I think there is a more global need to rethink that particular intervention. And even before looking at the results and the problems regarding the lack of good governance and development in different places, I think the dependence on that particular army and that type of army should be rethought, especially given that it has involved France being blind of dynamics within Chad itself. The stability in Chad has been rather an illusion in the last years of Déby's rule, and that should be looked as carefully as the much more visible theme of terrorism in the Sahel is looked at.
Any more questions from the audience? We have space for one more question or so, but maybe until the moment we receive one more question, Jérôme. I mean, as you were talking, I couldn't help myself but thinking about the research that's been doing over the past years on armed groups and on weapons issues that you and other colleagues been conducting for us and for the Small Arms Survey, and we gathered the evidence about these armed groups and weapons, and to some extent maybe we can claim that we sent early warning messages at some point that could prepare all of us better for these moments. So I don't know if you would like to reflect briefly on these issues related to armed groups and weapons based on the publications and research that we've conducted before I go back to one final or two questions from the audience.
Well, I indeed believe we in Sahara reporting in particular, we sent some kind of information that could have acted as early warnings. I'm not that sure they did it. As you know, and maybe it doesn't matter so much, but in many cases, I'm thinking as well of Sudan and South Sudan, the warnings you may send are misused. For instance, our description of the Chadian rebellion in Libya actually, I think, made quite clear that the somehow generally foreign perspective, but also Libyan perspective, that those guys are just mercenaries. We made quite clear that they actually still had a cause and were trying to survive in the event of a possible raid on Chad, and this is what they did. We also made clear that only negotiations could and inclusive dialogue could solve the problem, and that it should not happen within a Libyan framework, but within a Chadian framework involving all Chadian players. I don't think we will listen that much on that one, especially. Then I would say we also predicted not only that eventuality that what took place, and not only we were also not blind on the divisions within the Chadian power, which actually ended, I think, playing possibly a much more crucial role than the rebel attack itself. The rebel attack may just have been a catalyst, incidentally leading to Déby's death. But the deeper dynamics within the Chadian army may have been more crucial. In any case, I think we also felt that this is not only Déby's responsibility, of course, but that the state of marginalization of northern Chad not only made it a fertile ground for continuous rebellion, but also fed the feeling, that more global feeling, that there would be a rebellion that would not only be a rebellion from abroad, like the usual Chadian rebellion based abroad, supported from abroad, but a quite genuine correspondence between maybe more than at many periods between the rebels' aspirations and the feelings of marginalization of northern Chad people, with communities straddling the Libyan and Chad border. I think that ground will likely remain important. This is why the fact that that particular rebellion, the fact was actually defeated, doesn't matter that much. The contestation is still there, and the demands still do matter.
We have 2 more minutes to go, and I have another question from Katie here. And the question is, what is the likely impact on the democratic setting in Chad? Is an opportunity forward or threat? We conclude with this important
question. To me, or maybe I'm too optimistic, but I think definitely an opportunity forward. But then opportunities don't always last long. And in Chad's history, similar opportunities have been missed. When Chad was attacked in the past by rebels, most importantly in 2008, there would have been opportunities to organize democratic transition and dialogue. And France had the leverage to push for it, but didn't do it. Of course, that window was rather short, but that was a key moment. And let's not forget that at that time, the official peaceful unarmed opposition leader was killed in Chad during that attack, which is actually showing you how much indeed sometimes an opportunity can actually turn into a very negative repression. But so I would say for now there is still an opportunity, and the window may last longer. So so the opportunity may last longer as well.
Well, that's very, very clear answer about how long this opportunity will last. And thank you so much for that, Jérôme. And thank you for all the insights, throughout the past 40 minutes or so that we covered so many issues. And I know rather at the general level sometimes, but the idea was to offer as much as possible entry points to engage with and insights coming directly from the field and how we can engage with it from our different perspectives. So thank you so much for all of that, Jérôme, and for being with us today in this webinar, and for all the audience for the questions and for being with us. And this is another reminder that this webinar is recorded and will be available on our website shortly. And also a final reminder that our next webinar will be on the 1st of June, where we will have a briefing on Libya with our SANA expert, Jalel Harchaoui, where we talk about Libya's where does it stand now and where it is moving to. And that will be on Tuesday, 1st of June at 2 p.m. when we will see, hopefully, many of you. I just shared the link here for more details about the webinar and how you can register for it. But on that note, I would like to thank you, Jérôme, once again for being with us, and thanks all the audience. And please take care, stay safe until we see each other next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you all.